Yeah, but it's time for us to have a conversation about World Malaria Day and where it is that we find ourselves as a country as far as malaria is concerned. Of course, there's this whole, last 2 years of absolute frantic, dealing with COVID and all of that. The country has been in a very much of a frantic situation. But malaria kills and has killed a lot more people than COVID could ever imagine to do, right? Well, we've been joined in the studio by Dr. Linda Eva Amwa, and she is with Noguchi, a senior research scientist with Noguchi, and she's going to help us to get into this conversation and find out where we are as a country, really. Hi.
Hello.
Dr. Amwa, you're welcome.
Thank you very much.
All right. Now, let's get into the reality of it. As far as Ghana is concerned, the space in which we find ourselves, how bad is the situation? Malaria.
Malaria is pretty bad in Ghana. So the National Malaria Control Program has some statistics, and we realized that malaria accounts for about 20% of our outpatient cases. So most people who go to the malaria, go to the hospitals actually have malaria.
Wow.
And mainly children under 5 and then pregnant women. And so despite COVID, we still had a lot of malaria cases, and malaria still is a big problem in Ghana.
20%. That means that every 5 people that walk through the outpatient department, one has malaria.
Sort of.
That's serious.
That's a big deal.
And that's those who actually go to hospital, as she was saying. There are so many people who sit at home and could have malaria, but don't want to go to the hospital or self-medicate, But that's actually quite concerning. 20% of patients having malaria. So the malaria program in Ghana has been around for quite some time. We think we're doing quite well in trying to combat the spread of malaria. Are we doing as well as we think we are with the programs we have?
I think we are. So if we talk about absolute numbers, the number of people who actually reported to hospitals having malaria reduced from 6.1 million to about 5.7 million. So there was about a 6% reduction. Percentage doesn't seem too much, but in absolute numbers, it's about 350,000, and that's a huge number of people. Generally, the malaria control program is implementing quite a number of different interventions, like spraying of houses with indoor residual insecticides, and that intervention alone has chalked a lot of success. The only problem with that is it's not too widespread because it's pretty expensive. The control program also distributes a lot of insecticide-treated bed nets, and with that is very widespread. The only problem with that is some people, despite having the nets, they actually refuse to sleep in the nets. And then there is that is actually a big problem.
Water, but you can't force them to drink.
Exactly.
You can't put the net over their bed.
And that's a very big problem. So there's a lot of education on sleeping under bed nets, not just owning it, but actually sleeping under the bed nets. Then we've increased awareness of the fact that you need to actually get tested before you're treated. So it's not just having signs and symptoms of malaria, but actually go have a malaria test done, make sure it's positive, and then get treated. And because of that, we have high testing rates and then more confirmations that are actually treated. So that is also helping us a lot. And then there are programs that are specifically targeted to pregnant women and to children. And with that, those who are actually involved in have increased. So pregnant women who have malaria, pregnant women who go for antenatal care, they are given some anti-malaria treatment to prevent them from getting malaria. It's called intermittent preventative treatment for pregnancy. And people who pregnant women who are enrolled or who avail themselves for such interventions have increased over time because they've gotten to understand that it's important for them.
That's
Okay.
good. Okay.
Let's pull it back a bit and let's go down to basics and say malaria. What causes malaria?
Okay, so that's good. So most of us think it's just the mosquitoes that cause malaria, or just when you're bitten by a mosquito, then you get malaria.
Is it not?
However, so the mosquito is what transmits the disease, or
Okay.
it spreads the disease. But if the mosquito isn't infected with the malaria parasite,
It
then
won't
it's
pass it on.
Yes, exactly. And so it's the same story or scenario as a hen versus an egg. Which one came first? I mean, what we know is that we have malaria parasites in people. The malaria parasites are like humans. There are male forms and there are female forms. The female forms do very well in the mosquito. They survive in the mosquito, and after about 12 to 14 days, they develop into a form that when they are in the mosquito and the mosquito bites you, they are transmitted from the mosquito to the next person. That takes about 2 weeks. So a mosquito bites somebody who has malaria parasites. The sexual stages are picked up. They develop in the mosquito. And then 2 weeks later, the mosquito that has the parasites then bites somebody and then deposits those parasites into a new person. And then they go through another cycle and another cycle.
So the real culprits are actually human beings who have malaria.
The real culprits are the malaria parasites.
Okay.
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 Yes.
So how much can your immune system help you in these situations? I mean, if it's a parasite that's living in the body, is it possible that someone's immune system, being very strong, could fight that parasite off and not really develop malaria, whereas someone who has a compromised immune system might not be able to resist that parasite?
Okay, so I think with COVID over the past 2 years, we've heard so much about asymptomatic people who have the virus, yet they don't show symptoms. I think we should have heard about this relating to malaria several years ago. And that's the reason why we say that adults usually don't get malaria. It's usually children who don't have matured immune systems. So majority of us adults actually have malaria parasites. Our body or our immune system is able to control them to levels that don't make us sick.
Okay.
So yes, if you have a very strong immune system and because of the fact that you have been repeatedly infected with the malaria parasite, then you are able to control, you don't have symptoms. But you become a big problem to society because when the mosquito bites you, it picks up the parasites and then it transmits it to somebody who has a much weaker immune system, and then that person rather gets sick. So yes, those people who have developed immune systems protect themselves, but then they actually are not protecting the community.
Society.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wait, you talked about testing before, to confirm that you have malaria before treatment. We noticed that now there are a lot of pharmacies where you can go and get your malaria test, which I think is good. So it saves people having to go to hospital, go through the whole maybe outpatient procedure before you can just get a simple test. Do you think that has helped as well in getting ahead of the disease? Or what are your thoughts on some of these other outlets where people can get malaria tests?
Well, it's really good if the pharmacies are testing. If they are testing, it's actually amazing. But the problem with Ghana is, so I'm taking us off malaria to alcohol.
Okay.
It says, if you're not 18 or 21, you don't drink alcohol. But you can send a 16-year-old or a 10-year-old to go buy you a bottle. It's just like malaria. When somebody has malaria and the person is very, very sick, or the person feels they have malaria and they're like shivering and they're very sick and like, I definitely have malaria, go buy me antimalarials.
Right.
The person who's going to the pharmacy can't get tested because they don't have malaria. They're buying it for somebody. So, I mean, it's good that anybody who has is actually tested before. So if, let's say, you've been sent, then maybe when you're buying an anti-malaria, they should sell to you a test kit as well, and then probably show you how it's very easy to use. Then you test before you use, because if it does happen that you don't have malaria, or the person that you're buying the medicine for doesn't have malaria, then you have prolonged that person's
Recovery
wait
period.
at going to the hospital to actually
Okay.
find out. So what exactly then
It's
do you
wrong.
have?
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, testing before is ideal. I mean, it should be the only way to go.
Test before.
What's been Noguchi's role in, fighting the malaria situation in Ghana?
Oh, okay. So Noguchi, I think, so we're a research institute. And then some of us actually work with the malaria control program, and some of us work with external partners. We work with diagnostic companies. We work with people who make vaccines. We work with a whole lot of different people. So there are certain research components that the control program may want to do that they are unable to do.
Yeah.
So then they work with us to do. So something like testing to see whether the malaria parasites that are circulating in the country are still susceptible to the antimalarials that are being given or not is something that is very crucial. So we have one group in the institute that is working with the control program to see across the whole country. They pick samples from different places and then they test. What is the genotype of the malaria parasite? Is it still, has it developed any mutations that could make it resistant to the antimalarials or not? We have another group that is looking at the drugs themselves. Are the drugs that we're taking effective against the parasite?
Okay.
So then we treat, or we have an in vitro system, so that is in the lab. We culture the malaria parasites, we subject them to the standard doses of the antimalarials to see, do they die or they don't die? We do that also.
Okay.
We also look at the diagnostic tests.
Okay.
If it happens that you go to the hospital with all the signs of malaria and they do a test, and the test says that you don't have malaria, the doctors will likely say, okay, let's do these other tests and see, maybe you have something else. If the test that we're using isn't sensitive enough to detect the presence of the parasite and gives you a false positive, a false negative
false
test,
negative, yeah.
then you have a problem. So we work with the control program and with other partners to make sure that the test kits that we're using are actually very good, very sensitive, and then we're working with other people to find out whether we can make more innovative tests for malaria. We have a different group that are actually looking at vaccines. So there are different stages of the malaria parasite, and even earlier on I said there are the male forms and the female forms, and then you have those that just cause the disease. People are looking at producing vaccines that target the different stages of the malaria parasite. So we have a very, very, very big portfolio, and different groups are responsible for different aspects.
What about the vaccine that's going to be rolled out? We understand for children there's the malaria vaccine, which Ghana helped to develop.
Yes, so
in the trial stage.
Yes.
Tell us a bit more about that.
So with that, it's mainly targeted for infants, and I think there's a schedule that from when the kids go for their 6-month, 7-month, 9-month vaccinations, then they have 1 dose of the malaria vaccine, and then now they have to come back at 24 months for the 4th dose. Yes, so this is really good because children at that age are very susceptible to malaria because they don't have any antibodies. And so it helps build their immunity, it helps them to survive if and when they are bitten by the mosquito. And it has actually helped us a lot.
That's great. That's good to know. Okay. Now, you've talked a lot about interventions and research. Mosquitoes, the ones that actually carry this parasite. Is there anything we're doing on the Ghana front to target the mosquitoes that spread malaria, maybe to, I don't know, make them sterile? Or, I don't know, just you're the scientist, but is there something we've seen that in other countries they've tried these kinds of things? So is there something like that we're thinking about here in Ghana as well?
So the entomologists will have more information for you, but what I can tell you is that we are, just like how we're monitoring drug effectiveness and drug resistance in the parasite, we're doing the same for the vector. So we're making sure that the vectors that are circulating across the whole country are still susceptible to the insecticides that we're using. If it happens that the insecticides that we're using are not effective against the mosquitoes, then basically we're just wasting money buying our sprays. So we have a group that is looking into insecticide resistance in the Anopheles mosquito.
Okay.
We have that same group is also looking at, you know, mosquitoes lay their eggs on still waters, right, stagnant still waters. So if you're able to spray the surface of these still water bodies with chemicals that can kill the larvae, then you can prevent them from expanding into adult mosquitoes. Okay. So we have a group that is working with the control program to spray larvicidal agents on stagnant water bodies across the country, and that is helping to reduce the mosquito vector population. That's a very, it's just that chemicals are pretty expensive, and so it's yes,
an expensive
it's a very
intervention.
expensive intervention, and it's not done as widely as they would want because there is just not enough money to do all of that.
Yeah.
Wow, it's a lot. But this is
Well,
good stuff.
yeah, thank you very much. Any final thoughts you want to share about malaria?
Yes, so malaria is preventable. The purpose of the World Malaria Day is to actually create awareness to the fact that malaria can be prevented. You can prevent yourself from being bitten by the mosquito. And so zero malaria starts with each and every one of us. We all have our own roles to play. It becomes expensive when we are not protecting ourselves, when the whole community is just waiting for somebody to take responsibility.
Okay.
If we each take responsibility and we have education and we know what to do, then we can help prevent the spread of malaria. And then that helps the whole country. If your child is sick with malaria, or when you're sick, you don't go to work, you're stressed, it's just problematic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we can all help to reduce the malaria burden, and we're hoping that the campaign to educate people on the very simple things that doesn't really cost us money, as in throw your sardine tins or your tomato tins in a bin, wrap it up, don't leave it for rain to fall in, for the mosquitoes to lay their eggs and spread. If we have fewer mosquitoes around, then the transmission would be reduced. And so we're trying to get people to help ourselves.
Good stuff.
Thank you very much. We've been speaking with Dr. Linda Eva Amwa, who is a Senior Research Fellow, Immunology Department of Noguchi.